So welcome to another MicroGiants meeting today. Thank you, panel, for showing up. We got our usual panel, JP Beal, John Mills, and Edgar Martin, who will give us a lot of insight on in their own small businesses and their own, business experience. And today we're going to be talking about crafting the marketing message. And in some ways, this is really one of the most challenging, and for creative people, one of the most fun parts of marketing. But it can go amiss in just the wrong direction. We'll have a few fun examples. And I think this will take us a little while to do, so we'll get started today. This will be a little bit of an introduction, and we'll move into some other projects here, some other deeper topics in subsequent meetings. As you all know, you're aware of the marketing planning cycle, which we put together here and we've talked about many times. I only bring it up just to point out that, as we start and we go around and we hit all of these areas and we get through with the targeting positioning, we're finally ready to be developing the content. We jumped over content, talked about media, communicate, the media and so forth last time. And so we're going to back up just one piece here because I knew this would be more involved. And we're going to jump into content then right now. And so here we go. So when we talk about content, it's really the message. What is the message? And so it's defined a couple of ways. It's pretty straightforward. This one is it's the words you use to communicate with your audience to convince them to do business with you. That's HubSpot's sort of official definition of a marketing message. So as we start this out, I thought it would be fun to share with you a place we stopped in England after we left the mills. And this is a co-op. Food is it a real co-op? I don't really know. Probably was some sort of a cooperative when it started, but it's a grocery store as we would know it in the United States. But if you follow the roof line right over here, right next to it is this, the cooperative funeral care. And so you have in one building both a grocery store and a funeral parlor. And so we drove into this parking lot and we thought to ourselves, I'm not really sure if that makes me as hungry as I was.
Well, and how can you be cooperative about funeral care? I'm a little confused about that. I mean, I know one party probably isn't as cooperative as the others.
That's right. That's right. Part of it might be cooperative and part of it might not be. But then you kind of go, okay, well, now where is the similarity between buying food and funerals? It's only not having food and starving to death is kind of what my thought was. So we thought that was pretty funny. But the point here is that what is the message you're relaying to the people who drive into your parking lot? Another fun, and then by the way, inside the store, as you all recall about the Budweiser mess we had, here's how much Coors was left. Here's all the Bud, got another whole Bud over here, Bud all over the place. They did manage to get a couple of other things, but their Budweiser wasn't selling either, just to show you that England was having the same issues as we were. Then we've got another little message here. It's like, oh, here's the play area and cholera burial ground. So it's sort of like, really? Do you want to go play on the cholera burial ground? It's just like, oh, what was the sign maker thinking? Or what were the people thinking when they decided they would turn the cholera burial ground into a play area? Sort of, it's kind of like, yeah, this isn't advertising, these are signs, but it's still a message. It is a message that influences us about whether or not we have the sort of emotional and or desire to, and maybe logical desire to really buy something. And so that's a kind of just a fun way to kind of open up. It's like messages can be really wrong. Okay, the marketing message really is, as we know now, this is a little refresher, it's targeted to a prospective audience based on your media selection. It's written and really designed. It doesn't always, we think of it as writing a message, but it also has to do with all of the visual side, the design, the layout, the font, the media that you're selecting. There used to be a comment about the media is the message, that way back in the early 60s. And we'll talk more about that, in a subsequent meeting. It's crafted to access the appropriate customer journey point. Well, you remember the customer journey and the different points that the customer goes around. So, you would craft one message for the need or desire. If they're trying to learn about this, you're going to craft another message to educate people about what it is, what the product is, advantages, features, benefits, company, stability, all that kind of stuff, brand reputation. Each one of these could end up being totally different. So then in addition to that, the persona. The persona then is something that exists within your market, your target. You've targeted your demographics, your psychographics, you know where you're going to go, what you're going to do. You still have different personas, different buyers to appeal to. So you want to appeal to that personas, behavioral and image. That includes, as I mentioned, sort of lifestyle and behavior, and also neuroscience. Neuroscience is a field that's been around for a while. Not very many marketers are tuned into it. We'll be talking more about neuroscience, which is a very eye-opening and a little bit scary field that's going to really affect marketing. So let's talk then a little bit about the persona. It is a detailed, semi-fictional representation of your target or customer that is informed by qualitative and quantitative data about existing customers and market research. In other words, and they're saying you pick an avatar, you explain in detail what this particular customer is. And so you've got this customer who might be young, this one who might be old, this one might be an engineer, and this one with a lot of experience, etc. So that, and you kind of go, well, wait a minute, if you're really doing tight targeting, won't these people be the same? And the answer is, well, not really, because you can have a different buyer. And John, you probably ran into this a lot in your electronics days. And that is that one buyer could be the purchasing agent or purchasing office, and another buyer could be the engineer. And so the question then is, well, who are you actually going to be dealing with? And so the point here is that if you're dealing with the engineer, you're going to write the message differently than if you're dealing with a purchasing agent. Maybe you're dealing with the owner. There could be 3 or 4 different personas in every niche market. So if you take a look at the whole world, we target that certain segmentation that we've, the target, the segmentation, sub segmentations, and then you've got the personas. And what happens is that you've got a couple of these to talk to. So the way that you would talk, speak to one part of it is about the product in context of, say, a younger woman, and maybe the product in context of an older woman. And so where the media can be selected so that you're getting one piece of that, you want to speak the right language to that particular one. Any comments about that before we go into a couple of examples? Okay. Nike, as you well know, everybody knows who Nike is, says where all athletes belong. Now, this is interesting because it goes right against what I just said. This happens to be examples from HubSpot, who I respect a great deal. Now, it used to be just do it, as you all recall that famous just do it. And I think that was a really good one because it basically said, get off of your duff, put on our shoes, go out and do it. And they also have shoes for every kind of athletic activity. And of course, people wear them on the street too. And so to just get up and just do it, it was really great. It was, I think, brilliant. But now they've come along with where all athletes belong. Okay. Now, how do you guys, not that you aren't athletes, gentlemen, but how do you feel about that? Do you feel like you're ready now to go out and buy some Nikes, knowing that this is where athletes belong?
Well, speaking as a swimmer and former water polo player in the room, when they say where all athletes belong, I don't necessarily need track shoes for my kind of athletics.
Okay, so you're not really attracted to that message very much, given that you're barefoot, right? Or you have maybe, I don't know, water shoes or something on, huh?
Unless they're making flippers,
Yeah, right, or flippers, right. I'm
Well,
not sure they let you really compete with flippers, but
I feel a pushback for
I
a
wish.
different reason. And I feel like, just do it was kind of a internal encouragement. It was like, you can do it. Come on. It's kind of like talking to the inner you, be encouraged. And that was encouraging. Where all athletes belong, ... If you're not here, you're nobody. It's like, are you telling me I'm not good enough? Or I actually have a negative pushback to that, because I think they're more interested in telling their own, we are the place to be.
yeah,
Come join us, as opposed to, we're going to help you go to the place you want to be.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And I mean, when it comes to Nike, there always been a sports active type of brand, but the perception of like, that's what they target. But then you have an audience that just likes to collect tennis shoes that has nothing to do with sports, or a fashion that allows you to kind of maybe use a basketball player that an entire demographic likes what they do, but they have nothing to do with sports. And so to me, it's like, that's who they want, but then somehow culturally other people made it their own brand, even though the brand does not fit them anymore. So I don't know what to think of that technique, basically.
Yeah, no, I think that's a pretty good argument. And in some ways, the consumer does grab a hold of a brand and kind of do their own thing. And in this particular case, you do have quite a lot of different personas. If you're targeting people with feet, okay, that's a pretty big target. If you're you're targeting people that have a certain income, because if you think of the entire world, there's really only a small, I mean, a big number, but a relatively small fraction of people who are really going to be spending $60 to $200 for shoes. And most of those people reside in the higher gross national product countries. And you've got to be pretty wealthy, I would imagine, if you're in Russia, to be able to just go buy a pair of $150 shoes and wear them around on the street. That's probably not going to happen. And in India, where you see people wearing $3 thongs most of the time, so they, even though it's a big world and everybody has feet, they do in fact have a niche market, several niche markets. And the question here is, are they really trying to grab everybody and say it's now for athletes, or are they going for your inner athlete? And here's where we get into neuroscience. People think they're an athlete. They walk around the block. Well, I'm an athlete, I walk. Or I would like to be an athlete. When I was back in the retail business years and years ago, we sold lots and lots of hiking boots to people who never made it into the mountains, but they wanted to go in the mountains, and they wanted to believe that they were going to go in the mountains and do camping and do all that stuff. And so, people who buy Jeeps don't very often, four-wheel drive, off-road vehicles, they don't very often go off-road. We'll do it a couple of times, but it's the idea that they want to believe that's who they are. And so the question that I have, and I think you're all right to question it, is, well, when you say athletes, how many people go, well, I don't consider myself an athlete anymore. There was a time when I did, but not now. And I already have a bias against Nike, as you know. Although I think they've done brilliant things. And as you recall, I used to know Phil Knight, and I bought Nikes from him personally a long time ago. So I have nothing against him, etc. But Nike has just grown into something that is a kind of a huge megalith, and you just wonder where they came up with this particular message.
I think it's a really interesting observation, just in passing, because the athleisure market is huge. When you think about Lululemon, they are an athletic wear company also, but you see it everywhere just as basically a category of everyday wear, whether people are athletic or not. So I'd just be kind of curious to compare how they market compared to this particular thrust of marketing here.
Right. Well, so, if that would be tantamount to them of, they would say, like, well, where all yoga people belong. When Lululemon, you're right, they probably only sell a fraction to those people who really, spend a lot of time doing yoga.
Well, isn't there a more fundamental question though, too, Ron? I'm just wondering, when Nike starts off, the guys who are at the head of the company are passionate about the manufacturing and the sport they're in with. They've got their whole life embedded in it, and over a period of time, as it turns into a machine, those people become replaced quietly by discipline experts. And so I get a financing expert, and I get an accounting expert, and I get an acquisitions and mergers expert, and these guys are like, "Yawn, by the way, this is sportswear or whatever. This is a business. And this is a business that makes money, and we're going to optimize it and make it run really well." And then as it goes on, you end up with a CPA and accountant, and God bless them because they're good people. But at some point, if you hire a CPA to actually be the CEO of your company, I think the decisions are going to be made based on equity and return, as opposed to whether or not the company is becoming valuable to somebody in this industry. So my question to you would be, how do you keep the passion in the message as the company gets bigger? Because I think that's what the disconnect is. Maybe
I certainly don't think I'm qualified to answer that question. But I've got an opinion, and I think it's very, very difficult to do that. And if you take a look at Apple, where did they start? Where are they now? You can kind of see that some of Steve Jobs is still hanging around. They still have a passion towards design and excellence at several levels. So they're still attempting to do some of the same kinds of things. Yet at the same time, they can't continue to grow like that. They cannot sell $9 billion $1,000 phones. That's not going to happen. There are people who don't make $1,000 in a year. There are millions or maybe even billions of people who don't make that much. So they clearly still have a target market. So, would they come out and say, we're the phone company where every phone user belongs? They would never do that. Because they want to be special, they still want to be known as something different. In fact, remember, that is what they use. That used to be their tagline: think different. And if you recall, One of the most famous advertisements in history in 1984 was the one where the lady comes busting through with an, sweating athletics kind of shirt on. She's swinging a huge hammer, and she throws it into the screen, and the screen explodes. And the whole 1984 kind of thing, like, we're going to change the world. And they were rebels then. They're not rebels today, but they still have this attitude of, we have to do something different in order to do something great that follows Steve Jobs. It's decidedly different from this slogan here. It really is. Maybe Nike's decided that they can't be everything to everybody, and they're going to focus. Maybe so. If that's where they're going strategically, maybe they're going the right direction. They have gotten a little far afield lately, and you just don't know really what they're about anymore, because they sell everything. Now, keep in mind, come back up here, committed to providing equipment to everyone who needs it, regardless of the sport. So, clothing and apparel. They don't even mention shoes here. So they may well be repositioning themselves for the larger market of apparel and equipment than in trying to get away from we're just a footwear company, and that could be all part of that. So, interesting discussion. So here's one that's a little bit different. We all know Zoom. We're on Zoom right now. We should get a little bit of payback from them for the advertising we're doing for them. It's a virtual meeting tool that allows users to connect virtually. I think we all know that. Meet on Zoom, a marketplace for immersive experiences. I don't know. I think that's just a touch weak in myself. So you meet on Zoom, that's fine. I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to push their immersive technology and get people to step up a little bit and buy a little bit more. And that may be just a fine idea. But it doesn't really, somebody didn't really spend a lot of time thinking about this. It feels like to me. So,
well, there's an element of redundancy in this thing. I mean, it's a virtual meeting tool that allows people to connect virtually. Hello, virtually shouldn't be there twice.
Right. Now that might be HubSpot who did that. And
a virtual meeting tool, is that one that doesn't really exist? I'm not sure. It's a meeting tool. I mean, I have problem with the actual complete syntax of that sentence.
Yeah. So
because it's not what it is, what it does. Doesn't Zoom enable meetings between people?
You would think that it wouldn't be a place to meet or an immersive experience. You would really think it would be about connections, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, it's like saying the Redlands Mill is an office space that is about office.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, that's great. What about office? Well, we've got it,
Yeah.
That's actually really immaterial.
Yeah. Right. So I wasn't too impressed with that. Here's an interesting one, because now we're talking niche here. Black Girl Sunscreen. Black Girl Sunscreen targets an audience left out of the sun safety discussions. See, now there's an interesting market niche. I've actually thought about this problem. I have some Black friends who, you talk about the sun, and they go, "Oh no, I get sunburned too. I can't just go out. Just because I'm dark doesn't mean." As a matter of fact, my skin gets a lot hotter than yours does because it's so dark. So I do think that there is an issue there, and there's a market there. And so they are using this phrase, "protect your melanin. Sunscreen is always in season." Well, I think it's kind of fun that they're using the word melanin instead of skin. So and then they say sunscreen is always in season. It's like, use it all the time. So I kind of think this is very interesting, and it's an interesting way to say very quickly who you are, what you're about. And in this particular case, the graphics really help tell the story. So this feels like a pretty decent one to me. So just to kind of summarize then, it's sort of like, okay, what then do you do? How do you outline this? What are the things you do to create this message? So this is sort of our first part of how do you actually create it? How do you write it? How do you design it? You got to know your target. We know that. You got to understand your audience's pain points. I don't talk that much about pain points, but I believe that they're valid. If you have a particular product that fits into that category of, I want to buy this because I don't want the pain, like cybersecurity or alarm systems at home, or pain medications because you have physical pain. I mean, those, you do want to understand that there are emotional pain points as well as physical pain points. Define the value propositions. So we have to go all the way back to talking about value, where you're strong on value, what your customers think about value, and all of the 4 different value components. And then prioritize the clarity and concision. That doesn't look right. I think I think that's a derivative of concise. Am I right about that? Ed, you're the smart one here on this stuff. I don't even know what this word is. Obviously, I cut and pasted. So you obviously want clarity, and I think you want it to be concise, is what
the quality or state of being concise. The archaic version of it is a cutting up of.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Concision, meaning to cut up. So there's a little bit of confusion in that word. I would say it's not the best word to use.
Well, but look at the irony here. Isn't this great? You're talking about clarity and being concise, and the word concision is so confusing, you can't even get what they're trying to say.
Yeah, it's I'm smarter than you. Look up this word.
Yeah, that's right. So you do want to be concise and use clarity. Use familiar conversational language. Now, this is even more funny because they use... Here's a really bad example of what they're trying to say. And okay. Showcase your brand's originality. User-generated content is always good. Appeal to your customer emotions and logic, and we'll talk about emotions and logic in our next meetings. And then extend your story with a QR code. I sort of added that, the last couple of them. The reason there is that there is a short, concise sort of a motto, and there are other names for a short story about who you are, what you are. It could be like a positioning statement. But when you're writing ad copy, you've got more room to be able to say a little bit more about it. And you can say that both graphically and with words. But sometimes you have a good, strong story that can be concise, yet still needs more space or time. And that's the time to move them a little further on the customer journey and tell them a little more. And therefore, I'm saying, you can write a long version and a short version.
What's absent from this message, and it's probably because they don't think it's necessary, because nobody would ever do this, but what's absent is to have integrity in what it is you're promoting.
Well, you're right to point that out, and integrity is a very important part of say value, your proposition too. So I mean, it could be fit in there, but it doesn't hurt actually mentioning integrity, because I think that it's difficult to sell products that don't have integrity, or companies that don't have integrity. So yeah, so okay, so that's kind of how we're going to get started today. Any additional discussion about the overall issues that we've discussed on just simply the message itself?
Well, I think I have one that I was thinking about. I think it's very easy for the maker of the message to talk about what they think about, they want to say about their business, as opposed to orientate it to the needs of the client. And I think it's, because if you've been involved in the business for a long time, you end up basically coming out with a proud statement of who and what you are, but you're not necessarily building a message that's attractive to other people. And I think your first example was one of those where Nike's kind of drifted away a little bit from what we're going to do for you, as opposed, come on and join us because we're doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the flip side of that. How do we be true to who we are and not try to put us up on a pedestal?
Well, I think that there are a couple of points to that. We'll kind of talk through some of those, some old clients next time. Part of that is making sure that your company product is aligned with what your message is aligned with your product. If you're not really proud of your product and say that there's not much integrity in your product, it's kind of hard to write copy for that. I mean, you know, and the interesting thing is that I think that there's been an awful lot of that. Now, Ed comes from a world where, you know, that happened an awful lot in the newspaper business, where people want to sell advertising, and then they'd go, I don't know what to do. And then the salesman is there going, well, I've got a whole bunch of ideas for you, and I'll just write this, and this. And, you know, they would write and misrepresent a company. A company misrepresents itself if they don't have integrity. But people see through that. And that's a real poor long-term deal. Just as we're questioning what Nike is doing, other people are going to question every company that they do business with, whether or not they're, you know, holding up to the standards, whether they've fallen back, their service isn't as good as it used to be. There are a whole lot of things that people continually recalculate their perceived value about the product and the service. So you want to defend yourself, Ed?
Well, I think the way you put it, Ron, is best, the perceived value, and not trying to represent it, but represent what the proposition is. But with the newspaper business, it was a different way of showing everything and justifying everything. And with the internet, it just changed the whole dynamics, the whole evaluation process.
Yeah.
It was more based on the value you received that could be measured, rather than saying we have $300,000 of paid circulation.
Right. Well, and in fairness, I mean, you were the COO, and it's not like you could keep your, you know, huge troops of salespeople, you know, all being the you know, the perfect salespeople all the time, who could both sell and write copy and do the whole thing without making mistakes or, say, slightly misrepresenting the client on behalf of the client. They're trying to create advertising that is effective and draws people in. And of course, we were in a different era for a long time. And the idea is that, well, what do you do to be seen? Well, you got to have an ad to be seen. If somebody doesn't know you're around the corner, you got to have advertising and signage in order to tell people you're around the corner. We don't have to do that today, because we know how to get to most people on the internet today. And we have, you know, frankly, publications that are much more targeted than they used to be. So, you know, you can speak directly to people in this way, and marketing effectiveness, I believe, has really gone up a lot because we have media that can be targeted a lot better. So, yeah, good. So, Edgar, you're involved in doing a bunch of this stuff, and you do it for your clients. Have you learned anything here? Is this do you do some of this stuff, or do you do something totally different?
Well, the biggest part that I've kind of resonated with this whole presentation is the positioning of what is it that you're offering, and being careful with your final product, because what you want to say versus what you get out there sometimes might be perceived differently. And so I've been I've been holding back 3 years with my company of doing more of a mass market, mostly because I didn't know how to position myself. in the market? Am I going to be doing restaurants of all types? Am I going to be, because I provide credit card processing to pretty much, I have the ability to provide to pretty much anybody I want. Was it worth it? I think I figured that out in the 2 years that only restaurants is what I wanted to focus on. Now, what type of restaurants was the next question? How much revenue are they going to be making for it to be worth it? And then eventually is like, if I do some mass market, am I going to be, here's a good example is free POS systems. That would be a good example of a commercial, right? Or an advertisement in social media. But if the word free might attract all the wrong customers that I didn't really necessarily want it to have, then was that a really good idea? Even though it had a lot of good response. And I see a lot of the advertisement from other POS providers, and that's what they throw out there: free this, no credit card processing fees. And so that's like a hook. Once they call you, they get to see why is it free and quote unquote, right?
Right.
And I feel like that type of marketing is also misleading. Is that what I want to do? And so that's what I've kind of been holding back to say, what is it that I really want? I don't want to do a mistake of providing the wrong marketing, bringing the wrong customers. Mm-hmm. So because I've learned a lot from you, I haven't gone triggered happy with marketing on what I do until I know exactly what is it that I want to do and what customers I want to do the commercials. So if I were to say, have I been closer to do mass marketing to get customers other than referrals? Yes, I have. What strategy I'm planning to use? It's more of a consultant role. Mm-hmm. So I have to rebrand like 8 times already. Yeah. I don't want to say 8 times, but rebrand the name or just whatever I need to rebrand to make sure I separate myself as far away from the POS as being the primary point of capturing the customer's attention, and more about the knowledge that I can bring as a company. Right now, even if it's just me, that's kind of where I see this temptation to just throw marketing everywhere and get a bunch of customers, but then I'm probably going to spend more time weaving who I wanted to work with and who I didn't want to work with.
Yeah. Well, you're right. That can be in my some of the research that I was doing in preparation for this whole series. There was an example that I ran into of a vacuum clean manufacturer that was selling vacuums for $100, and everybody who bought one got a free $600 vacation. And it was a little bit crazy. People would actually go, wait a minute, but I guess for $100, I'm going to give it a try anyway. And they buy a vacuum so they can get the vacation. They got so overwhelmed that it was a matter of hours before they had to shut this thing down, because they literally had like 800 or 1,000 commitments immediately, and were selling their inventory like crazy. But then they realized that this is going to put them out of business if they actually could fulfill all this. And they had to backtrack pretty hard and fast, got themselves into trouble. I'm sure that there might have been a few lawsuits following along, and they probably had to settle some, or maybe they had to give them the vacations, but that was a pretty stupid idea. Free can be a bad situation, and you want to be really careful when you say free, and you want to make sure that they understand that, well, it's free, but we got to get something. We get you to come into the store, we get you to bring somebody with you, or it's free with the purchase of another meal. Those kinds of free, you have to be pretty careful, because you can get the wrong customer. There's no doubt about that. And the wrong customer can do a lot of nasty things. With the dairy, one of the things that when they kind of lost control once of their salespeople, the salespeople decided to go after the easy sell. Now, the easy sell is someone who you relate to, someone in your neighborhood, and people who are vulnerable to making, say, poor decisions. And so you go and you sell a whole bunch of stuff, and they ended up having the drop rate go up like 300%. And because the sale is so expensive, the cost for the sale is so expensive, and the break even is months and months out. They literally lost a huge amount of money on that, because they were selling customers that were making poor decisions, making emotional decisions, say at the doorstep, that were, this looks really, really good. not realizing that it was also expensive. The service is wonderful, the products are wonderful, but there's a very tight profile that we've been successful with. And it's not 98% of the people. And so, when you just send your salespeople to go out and sell, they're going to hit some of those 98%, and they're not going to turn out well. So, I mean, I've seen this happen quite a bit. So, you're right. So that's targeting, and you got to target the right one. But I think also there's that integrity of the message itself is important. I mean, you got to tell them what you're actually delivering. And by the way, you got to be careful about rebranding all the time. People get confused.
And the rebranding part of it is a rebranding that only stays local with me.
Yeah.
And I haven't built a business card, a logo, an email, nothing since I started this. It's been Edgar selling the product and referrals to Edgar. And I've created products that I thought I could sell in mass market, but the fulfillment part of it was something that I couldn't fulfill without me physically doing the work. And so I created different products. I guess you could say that I tested the market, but I was like, nah, like Red Local 360, Olo Menu, e-coupon, all these things that I tried to do to see if I could use mass market, that anybody could do it. But at this point, the most successful product has been me providing POS support and onboarding and use the POS as a consultation tool. Right. That's kind of what created the most successful business model. And like you said, I've already have enough clients to know that you have to have certain revenue coming in for it to be worth it for me to be able to do all that I do that every other person does not.
Right. So you started by doing some advertising for some of your clients, and in that particular case, you were mostly selling visually, with some, like rotating products and plates of food and that kind of thing. But I was wondering if you were attempting to help them do bylines and write copy, because that's really kind of like, okay, well, how do you do that? How do you, can you do it quickly, etc. And I'll tag on to what you said about, well, I've got to make sure I have a certain amount of revenue in order to do some of these things. And I would add, I would say, yeah, absolutely. In all of the branding and advertising, writing, and creative that I've done over my career, I'd say only 40% of my clients really were engaged enough to let me do that for them. Maybe 40 to 60%. And we really only accomplished that in maybe 2/3 of those. And in each of those cases, they were pretty large clients over a long period of time. So I'll be showing you examples at our next meeting where it took 5 years to get it right. And by 5 years, I mean, we didn't try it 4 or 5 times. I refused to do it until it was right. And when it was right, then it worked really well. But you have to dig and dig and dig to understand. This is, I think probably the thing that resonates with me about the whole subject is this is one of the hardest things to do, is to get a positioning statement that works. Now, you don't have to use that publicly, but then you spin off of the positioning statement and you begin to write your description about what your offer is so you can engage with a prospect. That is a difficult thing to do. And getting that right is really important. And in some cases, it makes the difference between growing and dying. That's how important that is. And so that's why we'll be spending a lot of time on this.
I can definitely relate to that, what you just said right now, because again, it's what I'm holding back to not use the wrong positioning. And it happened, the very first customers I got, is like, I got lucky. I got a really good client. I thought I was going to make that much revenue from every client. Then I got the second client and took so much out of me to get it on board. then see my residuals and be like, oh no, this is not going to work.
Yeah,
So
right.
I had to go back and say, the way I position myself, it sounds like I'm helping everybody that's not making money. And so even though I try to fix their problems to make more money, it was the 80-20 rule, I think, in full effect right there.
Yeah.
And so I had to rebrand myself on how I position myself, actually, not rebrand, position myself to acquire the new client. And so I don't want quantity anymore. I wanted quality, I guess, the cliche saying, I guess you can call that. But, and then I need to make sure that my positioning and my pricing, if I have to, matches that as well too.
Yeah, right, good. Well, I think you're wise to be cautious about that. So, well, any other final comments on this before we wrap up and kind of get ready to dig into some real details next time? Okay. Well, then with that, we'll look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.